Welcome back to Contacts. We are joined today by Luke Gromer, basketball coach and host of the Coaches Club podcast. Coach, really excited to have you on and pick your brain about the way in which coaches can be better at what they do.
Love it. Yeah, Justin, thanks for having me. Love learning about this myself, how we can get better and talking about it. Appreciate you having me.
Let's dive in here and let's start this way. Can you help ground the audience in your background? How did you get into coaching to begin with? What's your background there? And then more importantly, from that entry point, how did you end up hosting this podcast and working with all of these expert learners to enhance the craft and the art of coaching?
Yeah, good question. I guess I would start by just saying that I'm the product of some really transformational coaches. Grew up just really involved in sports, played multiple sports all through high school, went to a smaller high school. So it was easy for me to play, a different sport every season, just heavily influenced by some of my coaches. I was definitely also the athlete that coaches enjoyed having on their team, not from the standpoint of I was never the best player, but I understood and did the things that coaches appreciated or sometimes preach at kids about not doing. So I was very much that kid. I also just I wasn't super athletic. So I knew I had to provide value to my team through my mind. And so I tried to learn and think the game from a young age. And so in some sense, that's kind of the background of how I just fell in love with sport. Thinking the game. I think that kind of naturally led into I think I could coach at some point. And then in college, wasn't really interested in studying anything other than education. Thought I wanted to teach and probably pair coaching with that. And then as I progressed through college and was doing my internship, had a chance to just volunteer as an assistant at a junior high, and just realized that I loved the coaching aspect of it too. And so I got my first job out of college and have been at that same spot since, and assisting with one of the 9th grade boys teams here at Fayetteville High School, where I currently teach and work. And so that's been a lot of fun. And then the other piece of it, the podcast, how that all kind of started. We were talking before we hit record. It's kind of a funny story how it all kind of came about. Long story short, I thought I was going to have a chance to give a TEDx talk, kind of stumbled into it. And these ladies that were organizing this TEDx Fayetteville event were like, yeah, we'd love to have you give this talk about the need for coach education. And I was like, oh man, I'm really not the person that should give this talk. I don't have the experience that most people do, or that a lot of coaches do. I'm not an expert. And then COVID shut the world down. So I didn't know if it was going to happen. Long story short, talk has never happened, but they were going to do it as a virtual event. So I ended up starting to prepare this talk that I thought I was going to give. And the way that I decided I was going to prepare was just to reach out to as many coaches, authors, experts, leaders in sport as I could, and just ask them if I could interview them about the topic and the need for coach education. And I think the reason most of them opened my email was because the subject line was just TEDx talk. So I think most of them probably thought oh, cool, this is my big break. And it was just me, some nobody asking if I could talk to them for a little bit. And so, but they were so generous. So many people were so generous with their time and knowledge and shared with me. And so after a few of those interviews that I was doing, which were originally just to prepare for this TEDx talk that never happened, I realized I really need to take these and share these as a podcast. I enjoy podcasts, have grown a lot and learned from a lot of podcasts. And so fast forward to April of 2021, just started publishing an episode a week on the podcast, and I've been doing that since. So about, I think, 8 months in now. And it just led to a bunch of kind of organic connections with people. And the most fun part, again, is just kind of being able to ask all the questions that I have and to figure out how do I apply this? I'm coaching, I'm in the middle of basketball season right now with these 9th graders. And there's so many ideas that I've accumulated over the last, 12 to 18 months from these coaches that I'm trying to intentionally apply in this ninth grade team that I'm coaching. But then also I coached a fourth grade team this last spring. And it was very much that same thing of like, okay, how do I take these things I've been learning and actually implement them in my coaching to improve myself, but also help my players get better faster, provide them with a better experience. And so, yeah, it's just been this fun journey of learning myself and sharing that with other coaches. And some of them have found it valuable. So it's been really fun.
Awesome. Thank you for that background. I have a couple of follow-up questions, and I'm probably going to bounce all over the map on this, but you described yourself as a player that did all the things that coaches appreciated and coaches look for. And while as coaches, we often know what those are, I don't think they're ever well articulated for our athletes. So what I would love to hear is, what are those things in a bullet list, if possible, so that coaches and athletes can know what those things are?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Oftentimes we expect things that we don't define for our athletes. Mm-hmm. And if we haven't defined it, we can't really hold them accountable to it, or we shouldn't even be expecting it of them. We can't assume that they know the things that we're looking for. And often we do that. And so actually I'm going to throw an assist over here to a group that I know you're connected with and familiar with, Justin. PGC Basketball. Have had the opportunity to work with them over the past couple of summers, connected with several of their directors. They just do a phenomenal job teaching basketball, but also they teach a lot of leadership, life skills, leadership development, personal growth to the athletes that come to their summer sessions. Mm-hmm. And they have an acronym that they use that I love. That's SHAPE, SCHAPE. The S stands for spirit, the C for communication, the H for hustle, the A for approach, the P for precision, and E for enhance. And I think most coaches would agree, man, if I had a team or if I had a player that actually lived out those 6 words, like that'd be special. That's what I want. I want guys that essentially live out values, right? And so I think that it's important, one, for us to clarify what are our expectations. What are the things that I'm looking for from athletes here, that if kids embrace this way of being or these behaviors, it's better for our team and it's more enjoyable to coach them, right? And our team's going to improve and get better. And then two, this other piece that I just think is so critical is we've got to catch them doing it right and celebrate it. And again, PGC Basketball does a great job of this. They've just embedded it in their culture. They call it celebrations. And it's something I've stolen and used with the teams that I coach, is just at the end of practice, at the end of a game, taking 90 seconds to 2 minutes to celebrate where an athlete lived out that value that you claimed was important to your team and that you said you wanted to see. So if you've talked about how hustle is important to you, you better call out the model. Mm-hmm. When an athlete hustles, you should stop everyone and point it out. Mm-hmm. Pause. Justin, you just sprinted to that line to get ready for the next drill. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I'm looking for when we transition. Thank you. I want to see that from everyone now. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that's all it takes. Mm-hmm. And it sounds so simple, but even coaches at the highest level know this, right? And I think there was a couple of quotes from Tim Corbin, baseball coach at Vanderbilt, and Coach K at Duke. And both of these quotes were just about catching them doing it right. Like, we got to catch them do it right. We've got to point out the model. Tim Corbin used the phrase, like, we praise the model. Mm-hmm. So when an athlete does it right, we make sure that everyone knows this is how we want it done. And so when we think about as coaches and we talk about the kinds of players we want, how we want their behavior to be, one, we've got to clearly define it. Mm-hmm. And then we've got to praise the model. And sometimes too, what we also need to do is we need to show them a model. They may not know what it is. One of them may not be providing a model. So we have to go get it from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. One, you need to model as a coach, but mm-hmm. two, like, go pull clips from someone else's game, right? Go watch an NBA, a college game together, like whatever it is, find the models of the behaviors that you're looking for, show them to them, and praise them when they happen. And it's incredible what happens it's contagious. It's contagious. Like other kids will start to do it. As soon as you praise Justin for sprinting to a line and transitioning quickly, oh, now all of a sudden the three other guys that look up to Justin are doing the same thing. Because right or wrong, the power of our platform, just because we have the title of coach, is just massive, right? And the words we speak to these kids carry so much weight. And because, we're the guardians of this thing that they all really want, playing time, right? And so our ability to impact and influence their behavior is massive. And sometimes the thing we need to do is we just need to catch them doing it right and praise it.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great example where the takeaway is those core values might be different for every program, but clearly identifying and defining them for the athletes so they know what they're chasing is super important. And then to celebrate them when you see them doing those things. I also would like you to dig into, if you don't mind, briefly in this journey of conversation. And you talked about this need for coach education and where that's lacking. What does that look like in a perfect world? And where can coaches get help when there aren't ready, available coach education resources like there would be for other vocations?
That's such a good question. I have no idea. I wish I knew the answer. I will say that I have some thoughts on how it could at least be better.
Please share.
And I think the answer is also like, it depends on the context and the setup. If you're at a high school in an athletic department, it's different than if you're maybe in a club or if you're coaching in your local parks and rec league. It depends, I think. I will say this. I think ideally, like there would be some sort of baseline education and certification for any coach, any level, any sport, like in an ideal world, just in the same way that like we don't let anybody walk into a school and teach our kids. I don't think we should let anybody walk into a court or a gym or a soccer field and coach our kids. Like I had to spend 4 years and $80,000 to get my teaching license. It took me 15 minutes and like $30 to get certified to coach. It's like, like that ideally would change.
So what would be included in that baseline education? And it's fine. Press pause. Yeah. I know it is a challenging question, but what I'm really getting at, because you gave a great answer. And for me in life, to be honest, the answer to every question is it depends. I don't think there are hard and fast answers, but I would say this: as you have gone around and you have looked and talked to these people and looked at what they do, and now you've coached the ninth graders, you've coached the fourth graders. It's like, what have you learned and what are you applying or trying to apply that are the baseline things that are lacking? But when you dropped into the gym, I didn't have this, and this, and it would have been really helpful to have these. Yeah,
it's such a good question. And it's actually a question most of the guests I have on my show, one of the last questions I ask them is, what are the top 3 things you think coaches should be educated on? And Perfect. The answers are really interesting. I'll share a few. And I think, again, the answer is partly, it depends. It depends on the level, the age and stage. But some baseline things, like coaches really need to be educated on like child development and psychology, just of human beings, like understanding how humans function, how groups function, group dynamics, those social dynamics. I think that's huge. I think another piece is just like a baseline understanding of teaching and learning and how that happens, coupled with like motor learning, right? How do we acquire new skills, physical skills, because that's what we're trying to build within sport. And then, man, yeah, those two are huge and broad. They cover, there's a lot that could go within those. I think also, I'd say there needs to be, obviously, like there's some important like safety training that like coaches should be equipped with, like that in often cases they already are, like your CPR first, like those things are actually important. Like our coaches should know those things. I think too, just the understanding of effective practice design and how to design a practice that actually helps everyone get better by having a high amount of time on task for every athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot that can go into that, but some practice design, understanding how to run a practice, which really all, like, so many of these things fit under the umbrella of, like, we've got to educate coaches and how to provide an experience that helps athletes get better as players. Like, they're there to get better at the game and helps them get better as people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need to equip coaches to provide an experience that's both good for them as a player and a person. And then, so there's a lot that goes into that. But I think those are some of the key pieces that can contribute to that ultimate goal. But oftentimes, like we've talked about, it's like coaches are just kind of thrown out there, and maybe you played, maybe you didn't, maybe, like, just go coach. And then to circle back to your previous question, like, the solution, like, there has to be some sort of feedback loop for coaches where there's actually somebody developing and coaching them. And I know you're an AD, Justin, like, and to my knowledge, that's usually not what athletic directors are doing within schools, because there's lots of other responsibilities on their plate. Maybe they would want to, but they just can't or don't have the time.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, I think within schools and athletic departments, within clubs, within parks and rec departments, there would be some sort of director of coaching,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who his job or her job is to train, supervise, give feedback on, and observe the coaches in this program, to ensure that they're actually delivering an experience that accomplishes what that program says they want to be about. One of the just powerful kind of illustrations or examples of what most sport experiences are like, I think this was from Todd Bean. He's a soccer guy, a good follow on Twitter for coaches around teaching and learning and skill acquisition. But he talks about how most athlete experiences or most clubs, it's kind of like going to a mall. All these teams are housed in one building, but they're all different stores,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's this, like, this club just houses this consortium of coaches.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go into this place, you get a random experience based on the store you walk into.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the case with most teams, right? Or within a club, right? Maybe you coach at AAU, or maybe even within, a high school athletic department. Each team provides very different experience that's often not attached to any standards of coaching, or even providing, like, a coherent sport experience from like a curriculum standpoint. So, for example, right, like, if you're in 5th grade and you play for, Coach X, but then in 6th grade, you play for Coach Y, and they're teaching things that are totally different, like, we're actually hindering learning. So, right, if you have a club that goes from 3rd through 12th grade, like, you want that to be aligned, that what they're learning in 3rd grade is building in 4th grade. Like, we build year by year with these skills and concepts and knowledge. And so ultimately, I think that ideally there would be some director of coach education that is ensuring that this experience is what we're going for, that coaches are implementing it, that it's actually accomplishing what we want it to, that there's some alignment, that we're actually progressing athletes positively. Because like I talked about, it's like, for most kids, unfortunately, their sport experience is just based off the luck of the draw of what kind of coach do you get, and what's their knowledge, and what's their desire to grow and get better, right? And that's sad that's the reality of a lot of kids' sport experience. That's why so many quit, right? Because they have terrible experiences with some coaches in their sport, and they usually quit that sport, right? Or they have really positive experiences with the coach in another sport, and then they love that sport, right? The quality of coaching that an athlete gets just has a massive impact on whether or not they stay with the sport long term. And so That was a really long-winded answer, but I guess in an ideal world, like there's people actually coaching coaches, supervising them, providing feedback, watching them coach, giving them coaching, doing the same thing for us as coaches that we do for athletes.
Right. So let me follow up with this then, and maybe we'll tighten this up, because you're right on all those points. And that's the ideal, right? The reality is, okay, that doesn't exist. But as an individual coach, what can I do to impact my team? What are some of the best takeaways you've had from your conversations that you've begun to play with and fail or find success with your teams that you're working with?
Yeah, good question. I think, one of the things that has been really powerful and impactful for me as a coach, and then also, to my athletes, that I think has really improved the quality of my coaching and ultimately their development and growth, is just a commitment to do less but better, and to stay more focused as a coach. And so there's a couple of pieces here that I'll hit on. I had the chance to write the study guide to The Coach's Guide to Teaching by Doug Lamov, just a fantastic book for coaches that want to get better at teaching. And one of the issues that Doug highlights in the book, and I think as coaches, we've all been guilty of it, or we've definitely seen it done, is, a practice is going, they're going through a drill or a game, coach stops practice, and for the next 2 or 3 minutes goes on a rant about the 15 things that everyone's doing wrong, or the 5. Hey, we got to do this, and this next time. And the reality of it is, our brains have a very limited capacity in our working memory. The amount of information that any of us can hold in our brain before it's gone is really small. It's really, really small. And if information isn't transferred from working memory into long-term memory, we lose it. It's the reason our phone numbers are designed the way they are. They're short and in those groups, right? And so one of my biggest takeaways has been that it is critical when I make a stoppage, 2 things. One, I'm going to deliver 1 or 2 pieces of information max. Guys, pause. Right now, we're struggling to do this. For the next 2 minutes, I want us to focus on doing blank. Show me that now. Play. Not only do we need to be focused with our feedback, narrow our focus, what is actually really important here, but we need to be fast with it too. I love the rule of 30. This is something that I got from Coach Mike McKay and Sefu Bernard, really sharp guys. The rule of 30 is just this: you've got to get your drill going, or you've got to make a stoppage in 30 seconds or less. That's hard. And most of us as coaches, we are not great at that yet. And so another piece of advice, just record yourself coaching and go watch it back. The film does not lie on our coaching as well. You'll see it when your athletes glaze over in their eyes and are no longer listening to you. But keeping stoppages fast, this is going to be 30 seconds or less. I'm going to deliver some really focused feedback here. Guys, right now, our spacing is terrible. This literally happened in practice 2 mornings ago. We're playing an advantage transition game. It was 5-on-4. And the offensive team just could not get a good shot quickly. And I just thought, guys, I've got to be honest with you. Your spacing sucks right now. It's terrible. Remind me, where are we running in transition? Boom, quick review. We're going here. Okay, what I need you to do now is I need you to run to those spots and space better so that you can keep this advantage and get a good shot quickly. Show me that now. Go. And then they started to play. And now this is the other piece. So we need fast feedback. We need focused feedback. And then we need aligned feedback. Aligned feedback is this: making sure that your live feedback syncs up or matches with the feedback you just gave at a stoppage. Because too often coaches make a stoppage. Guys, we have to have better spacing in transition. Play resumes. What are you doing? And then we're giving feedback on something else. You got to keep your eyes up. Like we just give feedback on everything else. And sure, there's other things that could be coached, but it distracts our athletes' focus from what we just told them we wanted to see. And subconsciously, what we're saying to them is the feedback I gave you isn't very important. I just gave you feedback, but I didn't even stay focused on it as the coach, right? So obviously it doesn't matter that much. So when I pause you and give feedback, you probably don't even need to listen because I'm just going to say it there and then move on to something else, right? But instead, what I did, guys, I've got to see your spacing be better. The only thing I did for the next 60 seconds is I just loudly called out any athlete that was spacing quickly and correctly. Yes, Carson, that was perfect. Way to get all the way to the corner. No, get wider, Noah, get wide. Like that's all it was. It was just aligned feedback in live play to what we just talked about in that stoppage. And it starts to change. It starts to change really quickly. And the whole reason is because as the coach, I stayed focused. I stayed focused on what I said was actually important. So I think that's one of the small changes that I made in my coaching that makes a massive difference. And that's the thing that I love about Doug's book and so many conversations I've been having, things I've been learning. The thing isn't that we need to make massive changes to our coaching. Maybe some people do, but it's actually a bunch of small shifts that we need to make that can have a huge impact. And I'll add one other thing to that: fast, focus, and aligned. One of the things that I mentioned in that example that I just want to highlight is the importance of having really good and crisp stoppage routines. And what I mean by that is just a routine for how you stop practice to get everyone's attention and then deliver feedback. Doug highlights a few ways in his book. I've used both of them. One is just yelling the word freeze. Freeze. When you want to stop play, yell it. And you've got to teach it. Guys, when I say freeze, I expect you to stop immediately right where you are, turn your body, find me, and lock in with your feet. Right? Or maybe you use different whistles to stop. Hey, if I blow one long whistle, that means stop right where you are. Or maybe it's two quick whistles. That means freeze. Right? I don't know what it is, but you decide what is the cue that you're going to deliver to stop your athletes. Then you've got to say, this is what I expect when I stop you. And you've got to be seen looking for that. So when you pause it, you better be looking, okay, who stopped immediately and who looked right at me? Justin, that was perfect. Thank you for freezing immediately and giving me your eye contact. You've got to call it out. Again, praising the model like we talked about. You stop them in a consistent way. Then I give that fast feedback. Guys, this is the issue right now. I want to see you do this. And then we resume it the same way. Ready, set, play. Something to start again. I think a stoppage routine is something sounds so small, but it's actually so impactful for a couple of reasons. One, it's just routine and consistency. It's so good for learning. It doesn't take up any of our mental space because it's routine that we've learned. The other piece is it's going to force you as a coach to be more fast focused and aligned, right? I stop it this way. I know I've got to resume it this way. It's really powerful for us. And ultimately, it's about increasing time on task. How can we maximize our time so that I'm not droning on talking for 2 or 3 minutes? I stop them quickly. I get their full attention, right? I give them this feedback and I get them playing again quickly. Athletes will probably never tell you it, but they will really appreciate it if you have some crisp, good stoppage routines because they're there to play.
No, absolutely. I think those are all great points and a lot of takeaways that are very simple, but not always easily applied. So, right, fast, focused, and aligned feedback, super simple concept, but it has to be consistent in routine. Same with stoppage routines. The other thing that I'll throw in there is, I think Tyler said it, but it's like, if you're going to stop, you have to say, like, if you're going to stop and the group is in the entire gym, 7 seconds or less, and then you're back playing. If it's going to be longer than that, you got to bring them in, so that they understand, oh, this is going to be a little bit longer versus, hey, this is just a quick tidbit and you can go. But any of those things, I think, all focus back on this idea of simplicity and being great at simple things, which creates compounding interest, just like in financial spaces, right? So I think those are great takeaways. And I think that you probably have a ton more of those that people can access.
Can I give 2 other quick ones?
For sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, as you were thinking about it, here's 2 other really small things I think can help any coach, cement learning more quickly in their athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of talked about brain science and the importance. Like, we've got to move information from working memory to long-term memory. The first one is this: we should review more often. If we taught something once, we should not expect them to be able to do it in a game. If you teach something once and then expect your kids to do it that night in the game, the issue is you, not your kids. We don't learn things with one rep. It takes time. It also takes forgetting and then recalling it, right? That's review. I've begun to forget something. Now I'm going to recall it. I'm going to remember it. The more times we start to forget, then review and recall, that's what moves information from working memory into long-term memory, right? Just a quick example and story. This season, we're running kind of a dribble drive offense. If you're familiar with that and you're a basketball coach, essentially just how can we create a double gap to drive into for our guys? First few practices, our guys are struggling with it. They're not good at it yet. They can't remember to nail cut when they throw it across the court. They can't remember to shallow cut or hole cut when they throw it down, and it's just ugly. And the head coach comes to me, he's like, "What do you think? Should we keep doing it or should we scrap it? Like, what if we just go to this other thing?" I said, "We need more time. We need to do a better job teaching it. Let's do these things. Let's just review it and rep it more." We stayed with it. About a week or two later, said, "Hey, thanks for talking me off a cliff. I'm so glad we stayed with it." It just needed more time, more reps. We should not expect people to be able to execute what we want them to after one time. We've got to review more. I think every day in your practice, you should have 10 to 15 minutes where you're just reviewing things. And I would advocate, like, don't do those on air, do those with defense so it looks like what's going to happen in the game, but review more. The other quick tip, and it's connected to review, is this concept of interleaving. And this is a concept I stole from Doug's book again, but interleaving is this. Especially, this can be powerful if you only have a limited preseason with your team before you start playing games. So, you get your kids and you're playing games 2 or 3 weeks later. Interleaving is this. I work on concept A in practice, and about after 10 minutes, I go work on concept B. And then after about 10 minutes, I come back to concept A. So instead of spending 20 minutes on concept A, break it up into 2 different 10-minute segments, because here's what happens. As soon as you stop working on concept A the first time and you go to concept B, athletes begin to forget what you did in concept A, which is what we want. We want them to begin to forget it so that when we go back to concept A, they're forced to review it or recall it into their working memory, which again is ultimately that's what's going to move things into long-term memory, is when we force them to review and recall the information. So instead of spending 20 or 30 minutes on one concept, stop doing that. Spend 10 minutes on it, go to something else, come back to it, right? Just because essentially we're speeding up the process of forgetting and remembering, which is what helps move it into long-term memory. And if things aren't in long-term memory, they're not going to show up in the game. They won't. Right? If athletes haven't learned it in practice, it won't show up in the game. So I think those are 2 really, again, simple things, but in your practice design, if you start to account for that, you'll just notice a big difference in what happens with your athletes learning. Well, Justin, I can't hear you.
My bad. That's something we started playing with after Chad mentioned Doug's book as well, which is this idea of, the growth's not linear, right? You're going to get better. You're going to get worse. You're going to go back and forth. And that idea of review and reps and, giving them more time matters. And it's messy. Growth is messy. And if it looks pretty, then you're not really getting better. So I think those are all great concepts. And like I was saying a few minutes ago, I'm sure there's a million more of these on your podcast. So where can people find you? Where can they get a follow? Where can they pick up more of these nuggets?
Yeah, there's a few places. One, you can follow me on Twitter and kind of find links to all of that at Luke Gromer or at Coaches Club _. And actually, I'm about to change the name of my podcast, kind of rebrand it all on January 1st. It's currently the Coaches Club. You can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts, or you can just search my name, Luke Gromer. But on January 1st, it's going to become the Cutting Edge Coaching Podcast. So you see a name update, and there'll be an update on social media as well. The handle will change. But you can go to coachesclubpod.com. That's a good URL to go to. You can find links to the shows from there. I also, every episode that I do, I take about 5 to 7 pages of notes on what the guest shared with me. And then I share those as PDFs with anyone that wants them. So if you go to that website, coachesclubpod.com, there's a form there. You can drop your email in. And I mean, I'd say I just did episode 35 this week, and every episode has about 4 or 5 pages of notes on it. So there's hundreds of pages there. You can also get the study guide to Doug's book, or about 70 pages of handwritten notes. I wrote them on an iPad, so they look a little bit better than my actual handwriting. About 70 pages of notes on the Coach's Guide to Teaching. I also run some virtual book clubs on the book that Doug's been gracious enough to show up as a guest for as well. And you can find out more about those at cgtbookclubs.com. That's kind of where you can find me and find me that stuff I'm doing.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you coming on today and taking the time, and look forward to picking up more of these nuggets as I follow long term.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate you.